So I heard you talking with Justin Brierley recently, and he was saying about around the time of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the atheists, Dawkins, Dennett, and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens. And then he said there was a group of people at that time who said we need an atheism that's focused on social justice and LGBT rights and race, and we don't need God. So we can be atheists, but this is our focus. And I find that incredibly frustrating. And I know that you deal with this kind of thing all the time, which is, it's like, what do you mean by that? Because what you're saying is what we need is a set of values. Well, where do they come from? And I don't know if you're familiar with Carrie Gress. She's written a book called The End of Woman. And I think it's fantastic because from conversations we've had before that I'm very interested in lost femininity. And she talks about the end of woman and traces it back to the French Revolution and the desacralization and the elevating man and putting man and the state in God's place. And so I think part of what's needed is to sort of trace that back, because I don't think people seem to make a connection between how they've got to the place they've got today, where they're just saying, but that story doesn't mean anything. And of course, there's no tree and there's no, there's this stuff's all nonsense, because they've almost lost the ability to think differently.
Yeah.
So we have
for
to go
sure.
back.
But it's coming back, by the way. Like, the thing that's funny is that it's coming back, but it's so weird how it is. And so in some ways people are willing now, like in the kind of social justice world, they're willing to admit alternative descriptions of reality. And so, for example, in America, you'll have in the universities the importance of acknowledging Aboriginal point of views and Aboriginal sciences and Aboriginal medicines and all this stuff. And basically it turns it's religious, it's ritualistic, it's all this stuff. And so they can, on the one hand, think the Eucharist is absolutely an insane, stupid, made up nonsense, and simultaneously think that, that like having smoke put, or like a feather kind of like, put around you, that's this wonderful, beautiful ritual. And so this is what's strange, is that people are actually now beginning to understand the function of ritual and the capacity and what ritual is, and, what religious participation does, as long as it's not Christian, as long as it's anything but Christian. And but that in some ways is a trigger. I think it's a trigger for many people to think, okay, what's going on? And so as this happens, as the resacralization happens through all kinds of weird social justice stuff, but then also new age stuff kind of mixing together, then there will be a Christian resurgence as well. It might be small, but it's going to inevitably come as a reaction where smart people are going to say, what? Like, how is it that like the new atheist who just a few years ago was mocking Christians for the Eucharist or for similar things, and now is saying, of course women can have penises, like what's the problem? Why does that bother you? Like, it's just it's just like there are men with penises and women with penises, not a big deal. And so they can literally go into like complete transfiguration imagery without understanding what it means, and just seeing it just becomes a weird religious taboo that is a mockery, well, not a mockery, but like a parody of what true religious taboos are for. So
it's exactly what Chesterton is accredited as saying about it, isn't it? That it's not that when we stop believing in God, it's not that we'll believe in nothing, it's that we'll believe in anything. And that's really seems prescient in this day and age. It's really, I wonder, is there a metaphysical dimension to that rejection of Christian things?
Well, yeah, because the type of spirituality that is coming and that is happening, it's a revolutionary type of spirituality. It's a Luciferian type of spirituality. It's basically the desire for humans to liberate themselves from all stricture, all hierarchy, all gods, and ultimately it ends in a suicidal move. It ends up being liberating ourselves from ourselves, or being liberated from ourselves. And so if you understand it that way, as really the image of the Luciferian rebellion, or the gods
of the knowledge of good and evil,
or the gods castrating their father in the Hesiod's cosmogony, like image of revolution.
Mm.
That's what we're dealing with. It's Promethean, it's Luciferian, and so you can understand almost all of its manifestations, the idiosyncrasy, the collage aspect of New Ageism, where everybody is like, well, I do yoga, but I also believe in reincarnation, and then I still have my rosary, and it's like this kind of weird mixture because it's all idiosyncratic. It's all whatever I want, whatever I feel like. And and then self-identifying, the idea that I can self-identify apart from my constraints, apart from my body, apart from my species, apart from whatever. All of these things are related to this idea of this kind of revolutionary type of spirituality. So there's a coherence going all through these manifestations. And sometimes they look contradictory at the outset, but once you understand that, you can see that it all kind of fits together. And so on the one hand, you have a kind of idiosyncrasy of individual religious whatever whims, and at the same time you have these world religion type, like environmental kind of taboos that are pressing down and are becoming like world level, let's say. So all of this is coherent.
It's so interesting, particularly in Ireland. I mean, Catherine and I both got Irish roots, and it breaks our hearts to see what's going on in Ireland. I don't know if you heard, but just recently, Ireland's Department of Agriculture has proposed that they kill 200,000 cows to combat climate change and meet the EU's climate objectives.
Let's say it properly, as the sacrifice for Mother Nature.
Literally sacrificing animals to change the weather, isn't it?
That's right. Let's use the right words.
I find it very interesting. This has crept into Christianity, and we see it a little bit in our church as well, which is it's like the elevating of morality as the highest thing. So it's ultimately about a moral code. And I think so you just mentioned there, Mark, Ireland, the home of our ancestors, and the other thing we talked about this week is the Eurovision's entry in Ireland's Eurovision entry, which was a woman who identified as a they and dressed in a demonic outfit and was in a pentagram of candles. It's about as look how demonic this is as it can be, and I think this is the inevitable result of that whole narrative of oppressor and oppressed. I want to break out of, no one's going to put boundaries around me, and I'm going to break away from even Mother Nature, even God. I'm going to break out, even my own womanhood. And Simone de Beauvoir, who famously was influenced by the Marquis de Sade, and all these sort of grubby, unpleasant figures of the past that have threads running through. Bring this. I mean, this is the thing. I think, do people know when they stand there and they say, this is what I mean about in Christianity, when they say, I'm a Christian and I want to stand up for LGBT rights and I want to, gentle Jesus and everything's about social justice. It's like a lot of this social justice narrative comes from a really dark place with lots of sinister characters who promoted torture and abuse and free love and left a trail of dead children in their wake and broken relationships. And I think that's the origin story of what you're dealing with now. So to try and bring that into Christianity and say that we can synchronize the two seems impossible to me.
Well, it is impossible. I mean, in some ways, you could say that Rome, in the negative sense, right, like in the kind of Whore of Babylon sense, is always there. Right? It's not like it goes away, and so there's an aspect of Rome, like the aspect that's represented in the Book of Revelation, that is always there within Christianity, and so it's always creeping. It's always there on the margins. It's always kind of there. It's always kind of peeking its head up, and so we shouldn't be completely surprised that this once Christianity started to wane, that these aspects started to show their heads again. That, for example, the Enlightenment developed itself through pagan imagery. Like they used pagan imagery in order to counter the Christian imagery itself. And so all of this, it makes total sense. And there's a coherence to Satanism. Like it's a highly aesthetic position. A lot of the Satanists are not actual Satanists they're ironic about it, but it still nonetheless is a very coherent aesthetic position to take. And by analyzing it, we can understand why there's a direct correlation between, let's say, Rainbow Coalition stuff and and Satanism, because it is that self-naming and that kind of self-liberating of any type of constriction, and being fluid, and being, and not being named by anybody, so it's a very, so when you see that happening, it's like, we shouldn't be surprised. It's completely coherent. It's just, it's also what's great about it is that in some ways, if in the 60s, you wouldn't, those things weren't shown explicitly, now, like, the it's off, like the veil is off and everything is clear, like everything is just put out, and Christ said, like, all the scandals have to be exposed, like everything that's hidden will be shown. So this is something that's happening now. So now, at least, like you said, now we can, at least with Christians, like, say, look, this is it, like, this is the presentation. So but it's still going to get into the church. There was one in Canada of one of the Protestant churches, a woman who ended up becoming like the bishop, and I remember when she was elected, she gave this homily, and in the homily she said, like, it is time for us to reach up and grab and take divinity for ourselves. And I was like, okay, Eve, like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? You're literally becoming Eve. Like, why is this happening? But these are, like I said, the mask is off now. Things are just out there in the open.
There's an extent, though, to which it's too much in plain sight, don't you think? Like, some of the response from the Eurovision thing is, oh, why are you getting all upset about it? They're, like you say, it's literally happening in front of you. The woman is saying that she's casting a spell on everyone with the pentagram and everything, and they're saying, oh, it's just performance art, don't get your knickers in a twist.
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, it is, of course, all performance art. The quality of Satan is to be ironic. So we're not surprised that everybody who is involved in this type of aesthetic will say, well, it's all ironic, it's all just performative. It's not real, because that's exactly the position. It's an ironic and doubtful and sarcastic position to hold. It's an anti-Christ position. And so, of course, it can't have identity in itself. It can't be sincere. It can't be like, I'm really a sincere Satanist who really kind of believes it's all irony and all play, and they think that they're being tricky, and we don't notice. It's like, no, that's exactly what Satan is. I don't know what to tell you. He's a lack of identity. So
yeah, and all the time we're sacrificing our babies through abortion and killing millions and tens of millions each year.
Well, yeah. But it still ends up playing out, like you said, in terms of the porn industry, the abortion, the breakdown of the family. These are real consequences of that aesthetic stance, you can say.
Yeah. Well, that's all a bit miserable, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll go as dark as you want, but we can always come back to the light. That's also possible.
Yeah, no, it is awful. But I think, Mark, what you said there is really interesting, because I maybe try and talk to you as a father. I know you're here as a symbologist. Is that a thing?
Robert Langdon. You're the real life Robert Langdon, aren't you?
Yeah, something
from the
like
Da Vinci
that.
Code.
I remember reading the Da Vinci Code and thinking, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
That's a great job. I think I'll apply.
Yeah.
But everything is so much in plain sight that actually, even in schools, and everything's sort of presented as this is just kind and lovely, and actually it's sinister. There's a sinister attempt to get our children to believe something that is false, and to make them think that they're crazy if they don't believe it. And so, as it's all very well, we can analyse it and say, look, aren't the patterns interesting? And I thank God that you do that. But what do we do as parents who actually need to resist some of this stuff? And we're told, you're extreme, you're right wing, you get named bigger and so on, when really all you're saying is something that 10 minutes ago in history everybody would have acknowledged as true.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Well, I think we have to be wise as wise as serpents and innocent as doves. We also have to be attentive to what's happening and to the narrative, and be able to speak into it when it's worth speaking into it. There's no point in running full speed against a wall and just bashing your head in. I don't think that's what Christ did, and I don't think that that's what's useful. And I don't think that's what the early Christians did either. So I think that we have to be attentive, and we have to, be close to our children. That's obviously the solution. Like, the solution is to be close to your children, to know what's going on, to know what's happening, to know what's being said to them, to what's being taught them, and to help them think and to think it through. Because the truth is that it's a chaotic philosophy. It's a chaotic philosophy that doesn't hold, that doesn't make sense, that leads to the end of civilization, that leads to the abolition of humans. Like, that, we have a massive drop in birth, and that's a real thing. Like, that's a quantifiable thing, and all of these things are related with each other. And so, the satanic or the Luciferian position is suicidal. It is not one which continues life. It is not one which is that provides the fruit that we want from society. And that's something that, at least now, we're in a better position than we were in the 90s or early 2000s in some ways, because the cat is completely out of the bag and everything is clear and everything is just out there. And so we can have the discussions with our children. We struggle with that stuff with our daughters, especially because they're compassionate and they love people and they want to care and they want to respect people, and they have that affection. And so, just slowly bringing them to notice and to see and to discuss with them openly about where all of this stuff leads. But at some point they'll see it themselves. Like, some of my daughter's, let's say, friends, at some point she started to see that they're really self-obsessed, like they're narcissistic, and we live in this, and so it's like a narcissistic society. And so at some point you start to see it. If you grew up in a home where people are generous and they give each other, they help each other, they kind of do that, they're self-giving. When you start facing this kind of weird narcissism of identity, you notice. But it takes a while, though. But you'll notice.